Good evening, everyone. It's Marty Langland here, and this is January 6th, the Election Committee meeting, and we are celebrating democracy tonight on a day that has a very powerful history in American history now, January 6th. So here we are, and we have a quorum, so I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:32 p.m. Thank you all for being here, and Arthur, thank you for doing the Zoom. First item of business is to say hi and Happy New Year. And the second item of business is the approval of the minutes. Elizabeth, I want to thank you. Unmute yourself, Elizabeth. And I see Mike Zielinski has joined us. Welcome, Mike. You can unmute yourself, Mike.
Well, there we go. Yes. Hello.
Yeah.
Good morning. Hey,
Hi
Arlo.
there.
Hey,
Hi
Lynn.
there. And
How you
Happy New
doing?
Year. Okay. Got a nice turnout for this meeting. Thank you all for being here. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. And I have to just say that Elizabeth Goldberg did an extraordinary job on these minutes. And I really, really appreciate it. I mean, I think everybody in the committee appreciates your meticulous care, Elizabeth, and your accuracy is just really terrific. Thank you. It was a big job. And you know, that's
Lots of
part of the
details.
Yep. That's probably the hardest meeting of the year, the one where we actually go through section by section on the regulations and vote on any proposed revisions. And you did a great job. Um, does anyone on the committee have any amendments to the minutes? No? Okay.
No.
Okay. Jean, do you have your hand up? No. Okay. All right, then we need a motion to approve the minutes with I think, a special thank you to Elizabeth for doing this month's minutes. Is there such a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Anyone second?
Second.
Okay, Elizabeth seconds. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Larry, where are you?
Hey, I just got here.
Okay, all right. Do you
Beautiful.
vote to approve the minutes? Hi there.
Yeah.
You're looking good tonight.
Okay,
Good on the minutes?
I approve, yeah.
All right, then that's unanimous. And again, a big thank you to Elizabeth. That was a chore to do those minutes, and they really came out very clear.
You're
For the
welcome.
residents who here who may not have seen the minutes, they are in the packet for this meeting, and they really do give a good view of how the committee very systematically approaches looking at election regulations, section by section, item by item, and issue by issue. So take a minute to read the minutes. They really are a very good picture of how we operate. Any other administrative items from any committee members? Okay. The only one I have is to remind you again that the Ethics Committee has offered to do some ethics training if we want that. It's entirely up to you. If you'd like to do that, get a hold of the Ethics Committee, and I don't have a date for it yet. They said sometime in January, but that's entirely up to you. I basically approve of ethics training. I do ethics training professionally, so I probably think it's a good thing. Anyway, entirely up to you. All right, 7:35, review of the committee's work schedule. It's spelled out there in the meeting notice. The first October through December is putting the regulations together, setting the schedule. We've done that, all done. And that is now, the regulations for 2025 are now before the council. The council will vote on them at the January 16th meeting, and we're now in the 30-day public comment period on them. And I certainly encourage, I think we all do, any residents to comment on it, because voters should have the right to comment on the election rules, and we're glad they do here. And then January to March, you can see we post all the election notices, all the community indications. We get the candidates' materials in late March. We prepare the official VMA voter info packet. In April is when we send the verified voter roll to the contractor. We mail the info packet to the voters. We approve the ballot packet before the contractor sends it to the voters, and we conduct the forum. And then after the forum, we have the contractor mail the ballots. And in May, we provide voter services throughout the month of May. If people need replacement ballots or there are new voters, we can still add them up till Election Day, which is May 6th. And then on Election Day, of course, we have the secure drop box in front of the village office on the sidewalk. And ballots are due in time to be counted May 20th or 21st, depending on the contractor's availability. And then we hold the voting counting session, certify the election, and announce the results. So that's the basic outline. And are there any questions about any of the election committee duties throughout this? I mean, it's a very abbreviated outline, but you get the big picture. Any
Uh,
questions or comments? Yes, Larry.
So, what about after the election?
Well, we usually do a June report, summing up the entire election process for the council, which of course is a public document. And sometimes we put a June newsletter article in the village newsletter.
Mhm.
But basically, the election is completed once we certify and announce the results.
Right. So, maybe, later on in the meeting, I might suggest we put an additional thing into this election schedule. So let's see what else happens in the meeting.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. Any other questions or comments about the sort of overall structure of an election? All right. Next item, 740, my favorite section, residents' comments, questions, and suggestions. And the election committee welcomes community input throughout this meeting. So feel free. We don't just have comments at the beginning or the end. You are welcome to participate. You know, we work with voters, so this is your meeting as well as ours. Right. Any comments about the election regulations that were proposed or anything else? All right, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Was that
Lynn,
Lynn? Yeah, I can hear you, Lynn.
can you see me?
Yes,
Yes.
in your nice plaid shirt.
Yeah,
Thanks. Well, I've been sort of catching up on this stuff and looking at the different versions of your work product. And it just dawned on me that there's changes that have been made. And I was just wondering, I guess this maybe goes to Arthur, because you're a council member. Why do you think it's a good idea to have the council or the staff involved in the management and operation of the election process?
I'm not a member of the committee. I sent in a list of reasons, mainly because it consolidates management in one place. So we don't have multiple people contacting and dealing with our contractors. That's the main one. And it is a village function, it's a village contract, and so the manager is the appropriate person to do it.
Yeah, but I get the impression that that the function of the committee is to manage and operate the elections, and that is solely the responsibility of the committee. And I get the impression that their work product is quite often altered and by council or maybe even staff, but probably more by council members. And it just seems
Lynn, but Arthur, could you clarify for Lynn what you mean? It sounded like you said that you decided that because it was to the convenience of the council and the staff. Is that really what you're saying?
It's not, well, it's partly convenience, but it's partly the centralized management. The village signs the contracts, the village manages the contracts, it provides unified management, and for various legal and other reasons, having unified management is a positive way to do things.
No, not in this case.
well, the charter doesn't call for unified management.
Yeah.
The
Or
charter
convenience.
calls
Well,
for the election committee to be doing this stuff.
What the
I
charter
can-
calls for, or actually the code, calls for the committee to manage the election. When that was written, we didn't have contractors doing it. The committee did it all.
Well, I can understand that when you have contractors and you're using outside parties, that the staff and the council would get involved. But
I don't
until,
think so.
but
Well, hold on, Lynn. I don't think so,
may I
Arthur.
finish? May I please
Managing the
finish without
election
interrupting?
does
Hang,
not
hang on,
give
hang on,
permission.
Larry. Let Lynn finish. Go ahead, Lynn.
Please,
come to you next.
no interruptions. I will try
ahead,
not
Lynn.
to speak on top of anybody else, and I would appreciate getting the same courtesy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Proceed, Lynn. Thank you.
Um,
You were saying that
and
that the committee manages.
As far as the management and the operation of the committee, as far as creating the rules and procedures for the election, falls solely on part of the election committee. The input, changes, revisions coming from the council or maybe even staff just doesn't seem right to me. Once the rules and regulations have been set and they're all moving forward with this, then at that point I can understand that the council and the staff would be involved with outside contractors, because that gets into administrative stuff. But before that point, according to the charter, the sole responsibility for the operation and management and setting the rules and procedures is solely for the election committee. And from reading the documents, for tonight and preceding tonight, I get the very distinct impression that there's been council input in areas that should be solely the responsibility of the election committee. And that just doesn't seem right to me. And that's why I posed the question, why do you think it's a good idea to have council or staff involved in the management and operation of the election?
Okay, first, there's a couple of misperceptions. First, the way the code reads is that the election committee manages the election according to procedures adopted by the council. The committee does not, although we have asked them to come up with draft procedures, they have been revised and approved and are the creature of the council. So the council actually establishes the procedures.
Yes, but once those procedures are established, then the election committee then has the guidance under which it's supposed to operate. Then why are those procedures being changed in midstream?
The procedures are not being changed in midstream.
Well, languages being changed.
No, it isn't.
Stuff is being dropped and added, and it's not coming from the committee. It's putting extra work on the committee.
Lynn, I think you're misunderstanding the procedure here. Last year we adopted procedures that the committee had put together, and there were some of them was modified somewhat during council meetings. They were adopted. They're still in force. This year the committee has come up with some amendments. They have not been adopted yet. They've been proposed but not adopted. So we are operating under procedures approved last year. I don't think that we're violating any of those procedures.
Well,
Okay, Larry, I'm gonna switch to Larry, who's been patiently waiting.
Yeah,
Larry, go ahead.
Arthur, I don't know how you can talk out of both sides of your face.
It's easy
you
if you
yourself-
practice it, but go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, but you yourself have, now look at what you just told Lynn. You told him that the council establishes the procedures, okay? Now the procedures were for directions for the election committee to manage the election. Nowhere in there did it say that you any council member or staff member can at their whim involve themselves in that management. And you've done it repeatedly. So you're not actually reading the things yourself.
No, it doesn't say.
Excuse me. And many of the actions you've taken favor the incumbents, the people who are up for election or their fellow members on the council, which is why you shouldn't be involved in the management. And
Well,
you,
Larry, I have no idea what you're talking about here.
I'm sure
But
you haven't.
hmm?
So when you sent that,
Hold on a minute. Nowhere in any of the code, the charter, or the procedures does it say that the manager should not be involved in dealing with the contractor or anything else. There's nothing that prohibits that kind of behavior. So I have no idea what you're talking
why
about.
are you bringing that up? Excuse me. Why are
May
you
I-
bringing
may I
that point
read-
up excuse me, in response to what I just said?
What?
Larry, go
Repeat-
ahead. Larry, you have the
I'm
floor.
I'm
Okay,
confused.
so the fact of the matter is, Arthur, you have sent an email to the committee just in the past month, admonishing us and directing us to do things that is, I can't even understand where you came up with the decisions or ideas or involvement.
Can you refresh my
Excuse
memory
me,
on that?
excuse me,
What are you
excuse
referring
me,
to?
Excuse me, Rich,
Go
Arthur.
ahead, Larry.
The fact of the matter is, we submitted stuff to be put out in specific ways, as the regulations identify. Those activities were interfered with. And we were told that we were to perform those activities at the convenience of the staff management. No, that's not the case. We're to perform those things according to the regulations in the timely manner that allows the regulations to be properly performed. And for you to step in and instruct and say that we're doing things wrong, that's not acceptable. So
I think
I don't know what you're talking about.
Number
All right,
one, I
let
would
me-
suggest you think twice before you do that. But in
I would
addition,
if I knew what you were talking about, Larry.
All right,
Refresh my
let
you
me
memory.
don't know
intervene.
what your own email was?
Yeah, what email are you referring to?
The one you
Right.
sent to the election committee.
Let me step in here if I could as the moment as chair. Naomi, you have your hands up. Naomi, go ahead. Naomi?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I believe that the elections need to be done in removal at a distance of the council, which could include incumbents. So if indeed incumbents are running for the election and the manager reports to them, it's a obvious conflict of interest. To put the manager in the middle of the management of the election process is to give the council members who are running unfair advantage compared to the newcomers who are not known to the residents. So the manager who reports directly to the council should not be in charge of any aspects of the elections so that no incumbents have a favorable position in the election process. It's a pure conflict of interest problem.
Thank you, Naomi.
Naomi, can I ask, and I request all the other committee members, when this comes up for debate at the next council meeting, these are points that you should raise with the entire council. I'm just one member here.
So here's the thing, I will not be there on the council meeting, but I will be happy to send you all my view on this, as
Thank you.
well as the forum, by the way, which, if at the behest of the council members, a forum is optional, can be canceled for any reason, the way it's read right now in the regs, it is also an obvious of conflict of interest. Because for any reason, not you, Arthur, the rest of the council members who have lots of integrity, but for any reason, future council members do not want to hold the forum, they're going to be putting non-incumbents at a disadvantage. So we have to have guardrails for those two things to make sure that incumbents do not have a favorable position.
The principle, this is Marty, the principle of independent elections is really bedrock. And I think that we've heard, certainly over the last few years, from many, many residents and last year's committee and this year's committee also, that's an important principle in writing the regulations. Um, One of the issues is, in fact, the simple fact that council members, as incumbents, and we have very short council terms, so you're either an incumbent this year or you might be an incumbent next year. Um, they are not actually structurally in the position of being referees, they are the players. And the independence of an election committee or a board of elections, if you look at the county level, is an important safeguard to ensure that the election procedures are in fact fair and open. What Larry was referring to earlier was we had some problems recently. The 30-day comment period, for example, on the election regs that have been proposed and were introduced at December 12th council meeting, there's a 30-day comment period. And we had some trouble getting the regulations posted on the committee page on the website so that people could comment on them. And then we had some trouble getting notices, that you can't really have a secret public comment period. So there were some issues there about our ability as a committee operating a fair and independent election to be able to get the information to the voters. And the email I think that Larry was referring to that was problematic was an email from you, Arthur, I believe it was on the 29th of December to the entire committee that said that the staff can alter the election committee notices. And that was certainly news to the committee. Because
Well, let
if
me
you,
clarify that, Marty. What I said is that there's nothing in the code, the charter, or the regulations that were approved by the council last year that says that these documents are sacrosanct and cannot be changed, edited. That's what I said, and that's the case.
well, I believe that's your view, Arthur, and thank you for your perspective on that. I don't think well, Larry, go ahead. I'll let Larry respond.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean, Arthur, about your, it's not that I'm saying you're a bad person. It's just that when we're in these positions, sometimes we can't see what we're doing. The fact is, on top of that, you previously said as a justification for not having a mandatory quorum, that if people want to be known by the villagers, they should show up at council meetings.
Yeah.
And then you advocated at the last meeting that the minutes of meetings, it's fine for them to be as brief as possible. And when members did speak, other village members did speak, nothing of the new ideas they had or the improvements they had were in the minutes. All it said was, Benihana made a comment, and that's it. You then said that, or the village management said, that if the villagers want to see the proposed regulations, which we wanted a link so that the newsletter, when it went out, people wanted to see what the proposed regs were, they could press that link and it would take them right to the election committee web portion of the website and they could see it. We were told it's good enough that they're in the meeting packet. But actually, when you go to the meeting packet, what you see is a long, not a single document like that, but a long 60-page PDF that starts with the previous minutes, discussions of this and that, and it just scrolls on, and there's no bookmarks in it or nothing. A person's ability to find the proposed regulations in there is horrible. And yet we, as the election committee, are trying to follow state and county standards that elections should be conducted at the convenience of the voter. And that includes getting information to them. And we're talking to deaf ears. You just don't get it.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from other folks on that? This is your opportunity to share your views. Elizabeth?
Yeah, listening to Art, it struck me that there's a confusion perhaps between contract administration and project management. So obviously, the manager would manage the details of letting the contract and, the payment and making sure that the terms of reference and all were complied with, but the actual business of the content of the contract is the project management and is the responsibility of the elections committee. So that's an important distinction that perhaps gets mixed up. And there are committees that deal directly with the provider. I think the water management committee is one that I'm also on, and they've just just completed a proposal, assigned it to a contractor, and it's written in that they're going to be dealing directly with the task force. So, and I'm sure there's a long list of other examples where the committees actually get involved in the implementation and management of the of the deliverables. So just that thing. And then one other point I wanted to mention was, if I'm not mistaken, as a result of some issues that occurred in the past in the history of this committee and running elections in 2020 and 2021, that the council actually voted to restore VMA's independent elections in 2022 and 2023. So, perhaps that needs to be brought up, that was an action by the council. What did they mean then by independent elections, right? If not to allow
Elizabeth, what refresh my memory on that? What was that action? I don't recall, or I'm not.
Well, there were lots of actions. I wasn't a party to it then, but lots of actions that bordered on election interference that occurred in 2020 and 2021, and the other things that followed. They were all shared with the council apparently, and the council did vote at that time to in 2023 to ensure that the election committee could carry out its business independently as the charter prescribed. So Marty can, if you don't recollect that, Marty has the details and the history,
Okay.
and I'm sure that you were in it. You
Probably I was. I just don't recall the.
Yeah, that's all.
Susan Kahn has her hand up.
Susan, unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks. I think that Elizabeth made a useful distinction between contract administration and project management. And I was thinking of it like basically the substantive work of the election committee is to deal with the substance of the election and the things like the schedule and being the main point of contact with that vendor, and whether things that are substantive, whether there should be a forum, et cetera. These are things that the election committee, to me, I was thinking that they deal with. And so that kind of relates to what Elizabeth said, like project management and the contract administration. Yeah, I understand that the manager, the village manager, is a main, contact for making sure the contract paperwork is done. And if there's an issue later on compliance, like I think last year there was something about postal tracking, then they can help the committee to follow up on something like that. But otherwise, Mike, the village manager has their hands full with other stuff. I don't think they need to be involved in dealing with substantive issues that the election committee is dealing with, the timing of this, the timing of that. And so I sort of think of it as substantively, the election committee is sort of, that's their purview, and let that manager be the one to deal with that paperwork. But when you said that the manager is, or the village staff is always the ones to deal with the contract, my understanding is that they're not, when it comes to dealing with the attorneys, that's something that council, it's not the main point of contact is not always the village manager. When it comes to dealing with an auditor, other things that we have had contracts before, and as Elizabeth mentioned with the water group, where the committees or task forces or other people beyond the village manager are still involved. So I just think it's really important in terms of having independent elections and a committee that's not just window dressing, but is providing some actual kind of democratic function for representing residents' views that's independent of the people who are running for that office and the people who are currently in office. I just think it's really important to respect that kind of line, that they're that they should be the main point of contact for an election vendor, because that so many issues related to the vendor are really substantive now. But we
Susan.
still allow the, the manager to deal with the paperwork. But yeah.
Susan, I want to follow up on that if I may. This is Marty again. And thank you. I think these are very cogent points. The difference between contract management and project management really is the key here. And I would give a number of examples. You mentioned, Susan, that the council, not the village manager, directs the work of the attorneys, the land use attorney, and of course, Ron, our village attorney. That's also been true of Arthur. You'll recall a few years back when there were some questions about the accounting systems being changed, that you hired an independent forensic accountant to come in and make sure that our accounting systems and our IT security, we had an IT contractor too. In both those cases, those contractors reported directly to the council. That was not something that was managed by the staff. I think that Michael does a superb job, in my personal opinion, of managing all kinds of village contracts for services, from trash management to most recently snow plowing. And I love the way our sidewalks got done this year. That was great. But those are contracts that are within his job description, within his official duties. Those kind of functional things, tree cutting, street plowing, all of that. There it is appropriate for the village manager to be the project manager as well as the contract administrator. When it comes to elections, the charter seems to me to be very clear about having the independence of the elections so that we don't have council members or incumbents or village employees who report to the incumbents intervening anywhere in the actual management side. They do the staff support work, but they don't get to tell the contractor when to issue ballots or how to issue ballots or who to issue ballots to or any of that. It's the difference, for example, between the election committee conducting the forum and the village staff recording it and posting it appropriately. There are many, many situations in which a village manager is not the appropriate person to be the project manager. I'll give you another one. We haven't had any ethics cases, but if the ethics committee were to hire an investigator to help with an ethics investigation, that's an example where the village manager could not ethically be involved in managing the project because it's a confidential investigation. You would have to have the same boundary. And I think that what people are expressing here, what I'm hearing, is a very clear view that when it comes to independent elections, there's a similar boundary that needs to be respected, just as the ethics committee attorney or investigator would not be reporting to Michael or the village manager or the village staff in any way. Neither should the election contractors. So there is really a clear distinction here, and I'm glad we're talking about it tonight because I think it's important. Because as Susan, I think, said, this committee has very serious responsibilities under the charter to run fair, independent, impartial elections, and we can't really perform our duties if the structure of the election process is such that either the village council members or the village staff is in the middle of that management process. There's a distinction here. Does that help? Does that clarify it for people? Any comments on that? Again, I thank you all for what you said. I thought you were very, very clear. Yes, Elizabeth?
Jean and Lynn have their hands up, Marty.
All right, Jean, go right ahead.
You're gonna start with me. Can you hear me okay, guys?
We can hear you and we can see you and you look great.
Oh my God, my voice. Who can't hear my voice? Okay, I apologize. God-given. So I'm gonna hope not to sound like I'm rambling, but let me go back because I started as village manager. God.
You did it twice. You were twice, right?
Yeah, my first and second reign of Gene. There was some humor about that.
It was like
But
1804, wasn't it? Somewhere around there.
Oh, Larry, don't be bad.
Larry, I know where you live. Okay, would you remember that?
Oh.
You guys are great. Gene, please
I
proceed.
I remember with my first reign, Bob Freeman on Raymond Street was chairman of the elections committee. The election committee was very, very completely independent of the council. And I was told no uncertain terms. I did not get involved as this newly appointed town manager. The job of elections was the elections committee, Bob Freeman. And Frank Carell, I think, was there at the time. And then it continued for many years. But absolutely, the village manager was completely left out of the equation. It's just the way it was. It was nice because I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't understand it, but it didn't matter. But the thing about it is, it was a long history, I think, from the very beginnings of Martin's Editions. From what I wish I could find the old regulations. I'm sure I could, but that a part of the original recommendations and guidelines that we operated on from 1916, when we were first made a special taxing district, is this, that the elections committee was absolutely independent and no uncertain terms. So I think that's kind of interesting. My question is, why would we want to make a change? That's been the tradition. I would be worried about the current village manager, the village manager being involved at all. I very much recall that my second reign, there were allegations thrown in the direction of the village office that the village manager and her assistant were doing things, I don't know, some people didn't think were appropriate. I think to separate the village office, the village manager, and the village council from anything having to do with the election. It was originally designed like this, okay, in the original charter of 1916. God, leave it there. I don't think anything is improved. Any management is improved by not leaving it someplace else other than in the village office. That was the design. I don't know what you guys, why do you want to do it any differently? Let an independent election committee run it and get the heck council members and village manager run the other way. Tell me why you think it's a better way to run things to have you be involved. I don't understand it. Okay, I'll stop talking, guys. I can put my hand down, okay? Right?
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Gene.
Okay.
Lynn,
Lynn, I'm
Lynn-
gonna,
Lynn's
Lynn, I'm
hand
gonna
is
ask
up.
you to hold, yeah,
Okay.
Lynn, I'm gonna ask you to hold for a minute because I'd like to give Arthur a chance to answer Gene's question.
Yeah, I was just looking at the charter. And here are the two relevant lines. Section 602 elections. All elections shall be managed by the election committee. The committee shall operate according to rules and procedures adopted by the council. That's it. Doesn't say any of those other things that have been alluded to here. You may want to have that in, you may want to propose it, but it doesn't say it right now. That's all I've been saying.
Okay, hold on a second. Lynn, I'm gonna ask for your patience. Larry,
Yeah,
if you'd
that
go next.
That isn't the original wording of the charter. Wasn't that recently changed by, who changed that when the emergency, when you were allowed by
Right.
due to the pandemic to not go through normal procedures? to
Well,
change
the only,
charter?
here's the change that was made.
Yeah,
a
excuse
sentence
me,
was
Arthur,
added.
I'm not done, Arthur.
Yeah,
Oh.
Arthur, hold on, please. Let
Okay.
Larry finish. Thank you.
So
Larry, go ahead.
My point is that incumbents took advantage of a pandemic special governor allowance that they could change the charter. No one in the village was aware of it. And the wording that you're describing now was put in there. And that's part of the problem again, where incumbents did things that were in their favor. So to cite that as if that's the way it was originally, that's just not
It
true.
wasn't.
And I
Let-
would, who was, is there, Mike, you were part of the original charter development. What do you recall?
Mike, unmute yourself. You're welcome to join the conversation.
I remember that verbatim, word for word. It was only, 30 years ago, but I don't know. Really have no idea whether the charter has been amended that specific provision.
Okay,
one
I
after the
have,
other.
actually, here's the charter from 2000. It says essentially the same thing. All elections, this is now section 602 elections. All
Mhm.
elections shall be managed by an election committee. The committee shall operate according to rules and procedures adopted by the council and set out in the village bylaws. That's it.
Yeah, I would simply jump in here for a second as someone who did government rulemaking and regulations for a good part of my career to say that it is a standard government principle that regulations may not contradict the purpose of the statute. So if the statute says in plain language that the election committee manages the elections, the regulations cannot rightfully uh, put somebody else in charge of managing any part of those elections. That's a standard bit of rulemaking procedure. And regulations that contradict the charter by actually involving the staff in the day-to-day management of the election process do not seem to be consistent with the purpose of the charter, and the purpose of Section 602. And it's an interesting dynamic because if the incumbents, who of course do have a stake in the election outcomes, they have a self-interest there, write regulations that favor incumbents. For example, the ability to cancel a forum favors the incumbents. That's a structural issue. Or insert the village manager into the project management of issuing ballots, et cetera. Then those regulations could arguably be seen as inconsistent with the content of the charter and the intent of the charter in 602. So the fact that there are regulations is fine. You always need regulations to implement statutes. But what those regulations say makes a big difference. Does that help? Anyone else? Glenn, you've been patient. Let me go to you next.
One I would,
But Mike was going to say something. I mean, what happened?
Mike, you want to say something more?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to say it. To me, I've been looking at the charter provisions. I've been looking at some of these rules and regs over the past few years. And I'm still unclear as to which ones are actually in force and effect. But to me, the distinction is the charter gives the elections committee the authority to manage the election. So if you're managing the election, it's election committee. If you're doing something else, maybe somebody else can do it. A couple of things somebody said, I think Naomi mentioned it, said there's some question about somebody else besides the election committee being able to cancel a forum. I can't conceive of that. That'd be crazy. The election committee wants a forum, they have a forum. There's nothing in the code that says you can't have a forum or that you shouldn't have a forum or whatever. It's a call of the election committee. It's managing the elections. And the other thing that I would comment on is what Arthur said about some question about staff altering notices or something like that. I'm assuming there may be just, editorial things, but there's nothing probably in the code that says that can't be done, but to me, it can't be done if that's interfering with management. The election committee wants to put something out that says something and it's in that form and everything else. Nobody can change it. Nobody outside the election committee can change it. But that's just my viewpoint. Anyway, but again, I don't know about the history of the charter provisions, and I suspect there's no real substantive change from what we've read a couple of times and what Arthur read.
Peter, I'm going to call on you next, if I
Wait,
may.
Lynn.
Yes, I know Lynn's waiting, but Peter hasn't spoken yet, so I'd like to go to Peter. And again, Lynn, thank you for your patience with us.
Okay.
Peter?
First, I want to ask your indulgence in my unusual appearance tonight. I'm sick as a dog, and
Oh, Feel
That's,
better. Thank you for being here.
that explains my unusual manner of dress. I just wanted to note that Arthur is claiming something really unusual in the powers of the council to control the elections. That is to say that the committee shall run the election exactly as the council requests and with no other intervention of any kind. The council,
I was just reading what was there. I
well,
wasn't
but
interpreting.
as I understand it, that's the claim you're making, and that's justifying, you know,
Let me go back. Here's what it says. Election shall be managed. And as Mike Zielinski suggests, a lot depends on the interpretation and content of the word managed. All elections shall be managed by an election committee. The committee shall operate according to rules and procedures adopted by the council. That's it.
This
That's
could,
what,
so does that
I've
give the
been waiting.
council
I'd
the
like to
right,
interject here.
not just to eliminate the forum, but to eliminate, let's say, any notice to the voters of who the opposing candidates are? Is that something that the council can do?
no, of course not.
So Arthur, where does it say that the committee and the council should co-manage? Because that's what is happening.
That they should do what? I didn't hear that last word.
Where does it say that the council can co-manage with the committee the election process? Because that's what you're doing.
I'm not saying anything. I've just read what.
I didn't ask you that. I asked you, where does it say that?
I don't
And
know.
why are you co-managing the election process?
Let me
The-
pick up here by going to Lynn, who's been so patient, and then we'll come back. Thank
Right.
you. Lynn, go ahead.
As Arthur has so often quoted, the committee shall operate according to rules and procedures adopted by the council. All right, so at some point, those rules and procedures are established. And then the council has its guiding light and it goes on down the road. And at which point it should be fixed and the council should not be on the same bus riding, they should just then left the rules and regulations be what they are. But it seems to me that they're involved in these rules and regulations that they've established. And then as they go down the road and through this process of setting up the election and getting it all going, they decide they want to make a change. So they're changing their own rules and regulations, in process. And so it gets very difficult for the council, to just keep going down the road on a straight path. That's not right. The other thing is, in previous years, not just last year, the year before, or even the year before that, at council meetings, when the subject of the election process came up, there has been discussion about boilerplate. And to me, it seems that once the rules and procedures have been adopted, I can't see any substantial reason that they would be changed. That it could be a boilerplate thing. You can go to the office supply store and just buy it, and then just fill in the blanks, that are personal for that year. And this has been discussed at council meetings many years in the past, at every election cycle. And I'd like to have an answer why anybody feels that it cannot be a boilerplate situation. It hasn't been a boilerplate situation. And so every year we go through all these hills and valleys of, is this the way it's going to be, or is that the way it's going to be? You're going left turn, right turn, up the hill, down the hill. It's not right. It should be a very simple process, but it's been complicated by the changes that have been coming from the council. And they have no business making changes to rules and procedures once they've been established and set forth. They should then butt out and let the election committee do its work.
Lynn, that's exactly what the council directed the committee this year. That last year we adopted a set of rules and procedures. We said we liked them. Let's get on with them and, keep those in place. What was the phrase that was used? I can't remember the phrase that was it, but these are the ones in place. We don't have to do it every year. Let's just continue with the rules that were adopted last year.
Well,
So
well,
that
then-
was exactly,
then-
I mean, then the year before that, we had said the same thing.
All right, then if the council was happy and the election committee's happy, then why does it have to go through all this discussion?
Well,
Doesn't it
because the
year
election
after
committee
year
is not
after?
happy with the regulations that were adopted last year.
One of the, if I may jump in again as your chair, one of the problems was that the committee last year was asked to codify, standardize the 23 regs and did so. And then the council on January 4th came in with some pretty substantial changes to that, including inserting the village manager into the management process with the contractor and making the form optional. The council made those changes. The committee last year recommended that the regs that they came up with in December a year ago be an ordinance, and the council said, no, we're not going to standardize them in an ordinance. So there's been some inconsistency here, and many of the in fact, I would think all of the changes that the election committee is recommending this year are in fact changes that would take us back to the 2023 regs the council initially approved, which we were told last year to do, and then the council reneged on that and changed them. So what we're doing now is trying to do, Arthur, what you and other council members said, which is to stabilize the election regs. We went back and looked at the 24 regs, the 23, 22, and we gave you a set of regs this year that were pretty darn clean and reasonable, I think. I can say that. And we are trying to standardize them as the council is the source of the changes last year. And the committee quite properly, I think, reviewed them carefully and said, no, those are not good. The council shouldn't have done those. Let's fix that this year. So that's what we did. And, we have a 3.5-page little election committee report in December, which the council received. That then includes a red line that shows exactly what we did. So we've been very clear about trying to establish regs similar to what the council approved in 2023. It's an important process to have standard regs. I completely agree with last year's committee recommendation that these ought to be an ordinance and not be changed year to year. I was on the committee in 2015 that wrote the original regs for how you do in-person elections. They stayed the same for years. Council did not have to review them or re-adopt them every year. And I really think that if you're going to adopt a stable set of regs, you need to make sure they're good, which is what this year's committee has done. I saw some other hands up, and I'm gonna other comments. Peter, I know you were waiting to speak. Peter?
I think Peter spoke.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in? Naomi? Oh, Peter, there
I'm
you are.
sorry, let me, I think that Arthur is proposing something that's very dangerous, which is to
Peter,
say that because.
I
Hang on,
haven't
Arthur.
proposed
Let
anything.
Peter
I'm just
finish.
sitting here.
Arthur, let
attending.
him
Go
speak.
ahead.
Let him finish. Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Peter.
Because the
Proceed.
council can set the rules and the charter says that the council can set the rules, that therefore the council may do as it wishes. And that is not the case. That seems it can result in utterly unfair and dictatorial behavior by the council. And if that is the rule that the council is proposing, they are doing something that I think many of the residents would be very, very upset about. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Naomi, go ahead, Naomi.
I think what we're really talking about is potential election interference. If we do not put the elections committee strictly in control of the elections, aside from the manager, who by definition reports to the council, then we're inviting the potential of election interference by council members who may be incumbents. We have to separate the elections committee and its processes from the council. Otherwise, we're inviting election interference.
Thank you. I think that was very clearly said. Elizabeth, do you want to weigh in here?
Well, and I think there is a sound basis for that for that reason in past experience of this committee. And those who were there and witnesses and participated in that can say what happened, but there was election interference. And so there is a need. It happens. It's not just the potential, it happened. And it happened a couple of times in different ways, and that's been documented. So therefore, this is a responsible action on the part of the committee to try to put up those guardrails and say, once these procedures are finalized, and ideally they should be, like Marty was saying, an ordinance or something that is really, it is not changed from year to year. It would only be changed under extraordinary circumstances. Like, when you move from in-person voting to paper ballots, for example. I mean, that would be a major change of the way of working. But otherwise, dotting I's and crossing T's, as was done in the January revision by the council, which was truly dotting I's and crossing T's, changing verb tenses to conditional as opposed to declarative in all cases, so that everything, all decision-making could become optional or could be deferred or could be done by somebody else other than the election committee, for example. So it leaves the council, it leaves Martin's Additions open to complete meddling, interference. If somebody wants to go down that route, they're entirely authorized and entitled to do so. We don't think that's a good idea. That's all, Art. Really, we don't think it's a sound idea and good governance. And we'd like to see Martin's Addition take some leadership in that area and show that we're proud of these election and the work that the committee does. And my goodness, this committee has a lot of work. I can't tell you how many hours it takes to read all this stuff and go through these word by word, line by line. It's, have some respect for the poor volunteers that sign up for this stuff. It's a lot easier to make cupcakes and have fireworks or playgrounds for kids than to do this. This is really serious, hard stuff, and we're not playing games. And that's all I can say. I've only been this for a short time, but I'm quite amazed at what's happened at the process, and I'm kind of saddened by it, quite frankly. And I'd like to see the council welcome, and instead of paying lip service, giving us rolling eyeballs, as happened in the last meeting, smirking, laughing at some comments by some of the EC council, EC committee members, for example, totally dismissive of our presence and what we were trying to share with you in the process. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm sorry, I was going to save some of this for the next meeting, but it's such a straightforward thing. It's bread and butter, right? Rule making like this, it's very straightforward. It has to be precise, it has to be accurate, and it has to be transparent. So that's all. I'm sorry, I got carried away.
You didn't get carried away, Elizabeth. That was an eloquent statement.
Elizabeth, I'd like to just reply to one little bit of that, the declaratives versus the conditionals, the shalls versus the mays. The mays are put in just to give the committee, the council doesn't do it, flexibility depending on the circumstances of elections every year. The forum people keep coming back to, I think it says the committee may conduct forums. If there's one member, if there's only one person running, it may not be necessary to, or convenience of people to make it. There's all kinds of reasons why a forum may not be appropriate in a particular year. And that allows the committee to judge whether they should have it or not. The council isn't making those choices. It's the committee that's doing it. And so the whole idea here was to give flexibility. I could think of circumstances where where candidates are traveling, they're in the hospital, they cannot make a forum. Does that invalidate the whole election process? If it says shall.
Arthur, excuse me, this is Marty. I'm going to go to you in a second.
Go ahead.
Nothing has ever required candidates to participate in the forum. But they all do, including the incumbents.
Right,
mostly.
yeah. But I'm just saying, but my concern is, I think the rest of the council is that
let me finish, Arthur, if you would. Making the council, the forum optional in the regulations doesn't just give the committee the opportunity to cancel it, it gives the council members the opportunity to cancel it. Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I don't.
Yeah, well,
I don't think that's
Arthur,
the case.
Arthur, hold
Arthur?
on. I'm turning it to Larry now. Larry, go ahead.
despite your opinion, this is not the first election committee that has made it clear that that is not desirable, and it's not something
What's the that's not desirable?
to
The
have
canceling the
the
forum is not
the
desirable.
ability to cancel the forum. The forum should be a permanent offering. It should be a thing that occurs. And we have provided you with the reasons why voters should have the opportunity to see what a person who's running for office, their ideas and the suggestions or abilities they have and how they think and function, so that they can make a good decision when they vote. And that should be a fundamental, permanent process in the thing. Of course, there are times when all things could happen. The ballot box could be burned up. The voting machine count could fail. There's always a reason why something may not occur, but your election committee, which has, let me see, last year you said the elections were done flawlessly. So those incompetent jerks have repeatedly told you that this should be a mandatory, it's a shall, not a may, that there be a forum. And these are the people who have the expertise and the time and effort to ensure that we have fair elections convenient to the voters. And you continue to ignore what we're telling you for no basis. There's no solid counter argument you have.
I could only add to that we managed to hold the election forums throughout the worst of the pandemic, and I consider them a basic building block for any fair local election. Not holding them, the only people who benefit from not holding a forum are the incumbent candidates. And not even all of those. Most of the incumbent candidates, Arthur, you're one, who's expressed, enthusiasm about the chance to talk to the voters and hear the voters' questions. And the only people who actually would want to cancel an election forum are incumbent candidates who don't want to answer public questions. And that is election bias. That's a structural bias. To cancel a forum is a structural bias. It doesn't just disadvantage the new candidates who aren't known. It would disadvantage the incumbents who do want to talk to the voters. And it certainly disadvantages the voters, as Larry just said. So when we express our views as election officials who know a fair amount about election law, we have many experienced election officials on the committee last year and this year too. It really is incumbent upon the council to explain why they would override an election committee recommendation. And again, as I said, the 25 regulations are very similar to what the 24 committee recommended and are very similar to what the council adopted in 2023. If you go back and look at that January 15th memo, the report from the committee last year, on January 15th, Arthur, you'll see what changes the council made. We are trying to stabilize the process. Does anyone else have a comment they'd like to make here? Lynn, I see your hand up again.
Yes.
Okay, Lynn, all yours. Go for it.
I got to collect my thought. The thing about the forum is comparing council members who certainly are going to be more known in the community than someone who's coming in new, who has never maybe volunteered on a committee or a task force, but feels a desire to run for office. So here's somebody from Timbuktu. Nobody in the village knows this person. That person may have had some contact with the village office to get through the process. and maybe have had some contact with the election committee, to get on board and do the things. But for the voters, this is just Joe Blow. Who is this guy? And to cancel a forum, you're denying this first-time comer to be on an equal platform along with the incumbents, who to some degree are known by the community and the voters. So to deny a forum is just to say no to this guy, and we don't want to compete with you.
Yeah, that's true. And I also want to say that there is absolutely nothing complicated about holding a forum. All you need is a Zoom, set of questions from residents, and a date that the candidates choose and can be available. We have a lot of flexibility in the forum already. It's basically the second half of April, anytime in there. And it doesn't need more flexibility. It should be a mandatory part of the election process, as several people have said here. I want to welcome Paul Weller, who was a member of the committee last year and, of course, was also one of the co-authors of the charter. Paul, would you like to unmute yourself and say a few words before we wrap up this section? You don't have to if you don't want to, but you're welcome to.
Well, thank you. No, it's. I think I'm sorry I'm late. It's been a full day today to speak. But anyhow, no. My point just is that the election committee is important and should stand alone, and not really have the council overrule them in any way. I think it should be a standalone committee. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm standing.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate you doing it after a long day. Thank you, Paul. I think that's a good point. I'm going to wrap up this discussion about the election regulations and move on with one last invitation for any further comments from anyone present at the meeting. Okay. Arthur, I trust that you will follow up if the council has any questions for us.
And you will have your opportunity to make your cases at the next council meeting.
Okay, and of course, we welcome residents' comments. This meeting is being recorded. Residents are welcome to listen to it. And you can send comments to the council and to the election committee up until January 16th. This is a public comment period. Okay, with that, I'm going to thank everybody and move on to the next agenda item, which is timeline for public election information. And here we just simply need to lay out that fact that we will have regular articles in each of the monthly newsletters from now through May and possibly June as well. We will also be posting regular notices in the weekly wrap-ups and updates. We will also be posting some standalone notices, like about updating the voter roll and other issues as they come up. And we do expect to be able to post those notices without delay or editing by the council or the village staff. Let me just make that statement. That is our expectation. Any comments about the schedule for public election information?
No.
We are always available to answer any community questions from any residents about the election process. The current regulations and the proposed ones from the committee this year say that village residents and voters have the right to accurate, timely election information, and we take that very seriously. We have a responsibility to report to the voters and respond. Anything else on public election information? Okay. I will bring up one other point. I personally had a couple well, more than a couple, residents say to me that they have trouble finding the election committee reports on the village website. They are normally tucked away in the council meeting packets, or they used to be in the council meeting minutes. They aren't always in the minutes now. And one possibility there that I want to discuss with the committee is the idea about posting our election committee monthly reports on our committee page. They aren't currently on there, month after month. When I talked to Michael about this, our village manager, weeks and weeks and weeks ago, he said that there was no problem doing that. And that would be something. So my question for the committee is a simple procedural vote at this point. Should we draft up a little 2-sentence statement about posting the monthly election committee reports on the committee page on the website? Is that something you would like to proceed with? Okay, I need someone to make a motion. Larry?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion to post our committee reports every month on the committee page. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nomi
Yeah.
votes yes.
But wait a minute, I'm not going to vote aye unless you compliment Peter for that hat he's wearing. Then-
I think Peter's hat is superb. You're exactly right, Larry.
All right, fine, then I vote. I approve.
Okay, all right. Well, we
Larry,
have
I
a,
just want to express my appreciation for your very kind words about my hat. Thank you. Appreciate that.
you're totally welcome. So we have just taken a unanimous committee vote to post our monthly reports on the election committee page on the website, which I think is a good idea. Anything else on election information? Okay. The next item up is review of the 2024 contract with Electech and the mail vote requirements for 2025. I can tell you that having been over the regs a lot, the mail vote requirements for 2025 have not changed since last year. Unless the council somehow changes them, but the committee made no changes in that section of the regulations. So review of the contract. The section that requires Electech, assuming that they are the vendor again this year, to comply with the election regulations is in paragraph 7 of the regs. And I'm sorry that this is not available to the residents who are here. We can certainly send it to you. It's a pretty straightforward sentence. It says that Electech Election Services agrees to provide the services in exact accordance with this contract and the Martin's Additions election plan, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. When they're doing the plan, they're talking about the election regs that the committee has proposed, and hopefully the council will approve. So it basically requires them to comply with all the election regulations, which they did last year. They did not in 22 and 23, but they did last year, partly because the committee was involved in supervising them. Any questions about the election contract? Discussion by the committee. Yes, Larry, go ahead. Unmute yourself. Larry, you're muted.
Are you sure you want me to unmute myself?
Always, Larry. Go for it.
What I was, actually, I read the last part of that paragraph and got, I just think that's inadequate and confusing. So for example, in the unlikely event that an undetected malfunction within the machine results in incomplete results, the contractor liability is expressly limited by thus and so. I just don't think that's,
Is that not sufficient?
it makes no sense, but yeah, it makes no sense to me at all. In the unlikely event that the process is incomplete, provides incomplete results, shouldn't it say, instead of an undetected malfunction, what if it's a detected malfunction? What if it's the operator of the machine? I mean, so I just think this is, a judge looking at this would say it's gibberish and throw that paragraph out of the contract as not enforceable.
How would you change the wording, Larry? Would you say in the event of human error?
That the ballot processing results are incomplete, incomplete. Okay, their liability is expressly limited to providing the results promised in the contract, including any additional election processing that may be required.
Okay, let me ask you to write up the language that you would use there
Okay.
instead.
Okay.
And we can take a committee administrative vote on that language.
Okay, fine.
Okay? Is
That's
that all right
cool.
with everyone on the committee?
Yeah, now, oh, okay, wait a minute. You're
All right,
asking.
anyone have any
okay,
change with that? Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
putting a note here, Larry, write up.
Now, the other thing that this does is it appropriately opens another can of worms, okay? Previously, in the regulations, we had some contingency plans. But
That's true.
they were in themselves incomplete. And it dawned on me, I mean, that's really something that we should, you remember how you were looking earlier at a timeline for things that the committee might do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not saying we have to complete it this year, but I think after the election, we should start working on developing contingency plans for when things go awry. You like that wording, awry? Hey,
I like that. I
yeah,
like that.
I mean, like, there's a lot situations that, I mean, what's going to happen is people are going to say you're picking on the village council and the management people and everything, and yet you guys didn't even come up with contingency plans, and they'd be right. We didn't.
Well, again, last year's committee did have some, but I think it's valid. And again, this is not rocket science. There are contingency plans in a lot of election procedures, state of Maryland, counties at every level. And so it's not like a hard task to do. It would require some language being developed specifically that gave the election committee, again, the authority to manage the contingency plans.
But
And
we don't even have any.
no,
That's the
that got deleted last year, but it certainly can be put back in. And
Well,
we
what
have not
was,
recommended
yes,
it for now, but
okay.
certainly next year
Well,
could be done.
what was last year was also incomplete.
It was incomplete last year.
Yeah.
And even
so,
that small sentence that said that the committee was authorized to take actions as needed, that got deleted. So that's not even in this year's.
yeah, so my point is, since we're trying to create or hoping to get to ordinances at some
Mhm.
point, that we should, even if we hire an expert to work with us, you know, we could talk to who's the head of the county election?
Boris.
Yeah, Boris. I can't remember his last name. He may recommend someone, or maybe the state election people may, that could help us just, you know, who would be more familiar with contingency plans and could help us to put some together. But I think that is the proper function, a proper function of the election committee that we should plan on.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Other committee members, do you have any comments about the need for contingency planning? Elizabeth, I think your hand is up. Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
There you go.
It was just a question, clarification on the second clause, which is their fee. So it provides it, so the question is on the third one. In the event of a runoff election, the charge shall remain $9,757 for the runoff election shall remain as stated in second item. That's that's unclear to me. Is that a second charge if they have to do a runoff election, or is it included in the initial fee?
I read it as being included in the initial fee, but you're right, it's not clear. And I'm not 100% that I'm reading it right. So we will follow up with Michael about clarifying that phrase.
Okay.
Yeah, and again,
Just-
the number might change. I mean, you know, the price of the elections is generally under 10,000 for their services, but
Yeah.
it might not be exactly the same next year.
And you haven't had a runoff election, so you haven't tested what it
No, we
means.
haven't. We
Yeah,
haven't
so I
tested.
think it's just good to be clear on it because I stopped there when I was reading it. The other thing was on the seventh clause, the reference to the election plan. So I went into the regulations looking for it because normally these would be attached to the contract as deliverables, right? In
Correct.
most contracts. So obviously, this is a very large document. So are we talking about section 10, which says instructions for the mail vote election service contractor? Is that basically their terms of reference, or is it 10 and 11, 11 being vote counting procedures? Could this be a little bit clearer. It's certainly probably not the entire regulations document. Could you
Well,
refer?
good
Mhm.
question, good question. My understanding is that they normally get the entire election document, which is 12 pages, the election
Yes.
regulations. That term election plan is confusing to me. But you're right, sections 10 and 11 are the ones that specifically apply to the contractor in terms of the requirements they must meet
Uh-huh.
to service the election, to provide the services we're contracting for. So they get the entire package, but 10 and 11 are their instructions.
So do you think it would be useful to refer to that in this contract to say the election plan, in particular, sections 10 and 11?
I think so.
In case
I
they
think
have
so.
new people working, you know, and they're busy people and they don't want to read all 12 pages to find their orders.
That is perfectly reasonable. Larry, what do you think? Yes?
Wait a minute. Elizabeth, what are you quoting to, 10 and 11?
Oh, well, this was what I divined, Larry, today, was that this referred to the document that's going to be voted on by the council in another week or 2 weeks, right?
You mean the proposed regulations?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yes.
So
all right, so this is,
back in the weeds
this is
here
not
of this.
wording, yeah, this is not wording, contractual wording elsewhere. It's the regulations you're talking about.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Right.
okay,
And
fine.
it should say, instead of saying elections plan, it should say election regulations.
Yeah.
Because that's the official name of the document that we're incorporating here.
Right.
And in particular, sections 10 and 11 of the election regulations are the ones that provide the marching orders for the contractor.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. That's
Thank
it.
Okay.
thank you.
All right. I will do a markup on this contract and run it by the committee for your approval, and then send it to the staff and I guess presumably the council too, to update the contract. I will note that last year's committee had also reviewed the previous year's contract, and there were a couple whole paragraphs in there that had no reference to VMA at all, and that it looks like the staff did take those out for the committee's recommendations last year. So this contract is improved over the one that we saw from the year before. Anything else on the contract? Anyone else? Know me? Anybody? Okay, moving along. Almost done with this meeting, and I really thank you all for it. The last item in our action items is the timeline for the voter roll verification process. And that too is a chunk of work. The first steps there are to contact Boris at the county and get the current county voter roll for Martin's Additions addresses, and the current village office voter roll, or not voter roll, but basically it is a voter roll. It's not the same as the directory. The village office has what they call a list of residents, which they update repeatedly because people move in and out. And so the start for our process on the voter roll verification is to get the 2 documents plus last year's voter roll. So we have 3 documents. 2 come from the village, last year's voter roll and the current office list of residents, and 1 comes from the county, which is the county voter roll for Martin's Additions addresses. And then there is a procedure where spelled out in the regulations, in the VMA regulations, of how we proceed to review that combined set of lists of names, and then we send out letters to people who are not apparently still voters. They're not apparently still residents. You have to be a resident, obviously, to get a ballot. And residency is just not defined by the charter. So it is a step-by-step process. There's nothing magical or mysterious or complicated about it. It's just a step-by-step process, but we do need to start it in January. So I would like a committee procedural vote tonight, if we possibly could, with a motion to obtain the last year's voter roll, the current office list of residents, and the voter roll from the county for Martin's Additions addresses. If so, I will proceed to do that. Can we have a motion to go ahead with start the voter roll verification process? Okay, Larry, unmute yourself. Larry, you're still muted.
Hi, could I get a point of clarification before we do that?
You bet.
You say we're going to obtain last year's,
Voter roll.
who has it?
Well, I actually have a copy of it because I was on the committee last year. The village office is responsible for maintaining the documents that pertain to elections. They have a retention schedule, and so they have an official copy of last year's voter roll.
How is
So
it
that-
made?
Pardon?
Wait a minute. You're telling me that the village management is left with the responsibility of giving us an approved or official voter roll?
The voter roll is certified by each year's election committee after the voter roll is closed on election day, May 6th this year. There's a
Okay,
certification,
I
and that
understand. Now,
certified
hold on,
voter roll
hold
gets
on, hold
filed
on,
with the
hold on.
office.
Marty, hold on. I
Okay,
understand that step. And I understand that we then forward that for record-keeping purposes
correct.
to the village manager. But we should retain and have the official certified roll in our possession.
Well, we do,
So
because
no,
we've had,
so nobody should be, they want to contest it. That's the version they have to contest.
No,
Right.
Larry, the election committee goes out of operation after the election. So there is no continuing election committee.
well, it gets reappointed every
Well,
year,
you
but
know,
it wouldn't necessarily have
Well,
the same
actually,
people on it.
that's actually, he's got a good point that's valid. Well, we may figure out how to change that, but right now that's valid. So we have to get back from and then.
The repository is the village office.
Yeah, okay. Fine, cool. Rock and roll.
Okay,
Thank you.
Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Could you repeat the motion to obtain last year's voter roll? And then there were two other things after that.
Okay, to obtain last year's certified voter roll, the current office list of residents,
Mhm.
and the county voter roll for the addresses in Martin's Additions, in order to begin the voter roll verification process for 2025. That's the motion.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, unanimous.
So, Marty, could you talk to Boris or one of his people and find out to what extent their voter roll was affected by the 2023 data that was given to them and the most recent data given to them from Martin's Additions?
Yes, I can do that administratively. And so I'm putting a note here. I don't think we need a vote on that, but I can certainly ask Boris.
All right,
He has
thanks.
been, I can tell you, I've talked to him regularly.
Yeah.
He has been tearing his hair out trying to update the county and state. You know, the county voter roll comes from the state voter
Right.
registry.
Right.
So it's an ongoing process for him.
Yeah.
And ours is easy compared to what he's facing.
Yeah.
Any other questions on voter roll? Okay. Going back, closing up the meeting, residents' comments, questions, and suggestions. All right, Paul, you're still with us. Susan, you're still with us. Peter, you're still with us. Thank you all for being here. Would you like to add or anything else? Any comments?
Just to thank the committee for the good work they're doing, because this is an important area of Martin's Additions business. And I really appreciate the fact that they're spending their time in this behalf.
Thank you, Paul. That's really nice. Peter and Susan and Paul, I want to thank you for spending time with us tonight and being willing to provide your insights and comments, which I find very, very helpful. And I think everyone on the committee does. I think I speak for us all. So thank you for being here tonight.
And Jean.
And Jean. Is Jean still here?
No,
Jean.
yeah.
No,
Okay. Naomi, would you like to say something before we wrap
All
up?
I can tell you is we are one hell of a committee.
Well, I certainly am glad to know y'all, I must say.
Conscientious and totally dedicated to fair and open elections.
That is a beautiful closing note.
Mhm.
I concur. All right, last item on our agenda is committee assignments. I have a couple. Larry has one to write up the alternate language for the contract. I need to ask Boris, and I will write up the thing about posting the committee reports on the committee webpage, with committee page on the website. So our next assignment is the January 16th council meeting, where there will be a public hearing where presumably we and residents will be able to present the points that were raised tonight and any additional points that they may care to raise prior to the council vote. Arthur, would you like to add anything about the process here?
No, we'll be there and considering all views and opinions.
Oh,
All
Arthur,
right.
I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
You asked that I would inject my comments to the January 16th meeting, and I'm not going to be able to be there. I'll be out of the country. If I
Yeah.
sent those very brief comments to the council, would you be willing to read them at the meeting?
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much.
So why aren't you gonna be there? Where are you going?
I'm going to Mexico.
Oh,
Yeah, well, I'm offended that you haven't invited all of us.
Well,
I want to go to Mexico too.
next time.
You guys are just the best. Schedule for the upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is the first Monday in February. And I got my new calendar up on the wall here, which is February 3rd. The meeting after that is March 3rd. Can we have a motion to approve meetings on the first Monday of the next 2 months, February 3rd and March 3rd? Someone so move?
So moved.
I move. I
Okay,
second, though
All
I
right,
may not be able to attend them. Sorry.
Okay.
all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, 4-0 vote for February 3rd and March 3rd. Now we just need a motion to adjourn, and you guys have been great. It's 9:03 p.m. We said 9 o'clock adjourn. We are close here.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Larry makes a motion to adjourn.
I
Is there a
second.
second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye for me.
Thank you again, Arthur, for being our Zoom master and for, being here during the meeting to respond and listen to.
Remember, I
The men-
was just responding for myself, not for my fellow council
Yes,
members.
I understand completely.
Okay.
But you're the liaison.
Right. And they all listen to me, don't they?
Of course they do. They always do.
Mm.
Anyone else? All right, we are now officially adjourned at 9:04 p.m.
Thank you.
all.
I am going to stop recording.
Thank you.